And a special thanks to Onyx for supporting this week's podcast. Are you tired of searching for a campsite only to find it packed or off limits? With Onyx Off-Road's new motorized dispersed camping layer, you can now see legal off-grid camping spots in national forests right in the app. Plan ahead, avoid the crowds, and camp confidently knowing you're on public land where it's allowed. Download Onyx Off-Road today and find your own space. Thanks again, Onyx.
Hey, Tanner, thank you so much for being on the podcast, man.
Yeah.
I have wanted to have you on the Overland Journal podcast for years because you're doing you got one of the coolest jobs in the industry. You really do. I mean, to get to build expedition vehicles, and then you do lots of other things. You're a photographer and you're on the expeditions and you do all kinds of other really important roles. But the reason why we wanted to have you on the podcast today is to really talk about what has been years of learning around what makes an expedition vehicle effective, the systems that you have found that are reliable, the things that you would do different, the lessons that you've learned. So I'd really love to do the deep dive with you around how to prepare a vehicle for expedition travel. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just the last couple times that I've seen you, it's you're inside of an Alu cab, wiring up about, a vehicle worth of wiring, to get a system
wiring.
able to run. So let's start with that though. Let's start with wiring because one of the things that we've talked about, we have an article out there of the things not to do in building an overland vehicle. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we really focus on is the reliability of the wiring because it tends to be something that fails people most often in the systems that they implement into an overland vehicle. So what are some of your top tips or some of the things that you like about wiring or things that you pay attention to around wiring the vehicle?
Yeah. I mean, I started off, that was actually one of the very first things I did for X Overland is when I was still working at the camera store. I came here and helped Clay wire a light bar. And oh my gosh, the things that I have learned since then, even some of these trucks we still have that I built a few years ago, every single build, I'm improving the systems, figuring out what works, what doesn't. I think probably some of my best tips for wiring would be, for one, make a plan. Make a plan as best as you can on what you're going to be putting on it, where it's going to go. And then what I always do now, especially with shipping trucks internationally and needing to store them, is I like to lay a foundation of all my electrical stuff, and I put breakers in between bus bars that go into the battery. So what I do is, instead of just running a bunch of just a rat's nest of wires to a battery terminal for all your accessories, what I like to do now is run a big power wire from the battery through a breaker into a bus bar. And then all my accessories go to that bus bar, which makes it really nice to be able to work on it, store it, because you can
isolate it. Sure.
Yeah, you can isolate it, and then you can do whatever you need to do with your accessories, put it all back together, add stuff, take away stuff. Or for storing it, you disconnect it. It keeps all the OEM stuff in place, so you can start up a truck, run it around, but then none of your accessories are there having vampire draws.
Yeah.
So my number one thing, and probably one of the first things I do when we get a new vehicle to build, is I lay that foundation of the wiring. Even if we don't have a big plan on putting a bunch of accessories in it, I like to just know that, okay, I need to hook up power and grounds of accessories under the hood. So in these new hybrid vehicles, the start batteries are no longer under the hood.
That's right, yeah.
And so that took us a second to kind of get our heads wrapped around that. Then I was running basically a big power and ground to the hood and then making a bus bar location for accessories. And so it's extremely important, in my opinion, to just kind of take that extra time and work to lay out a really good foundation for your wiring. And then when you do go to start to wire your light bars, your fridges, your other stuff, you already have those locations ready to go to hook them up.
Or even expand into additional systems. And in my mind, one of the most important things is a very clear distinction between what is a vehicle electrical system and what is a house electrical system, and the ability to isolate those two systems. That way, if you have a high amp draw, or you got a couple days of cloud cover and the solar's not performing well, that the vehicle will always start because the starting battery has been isolated from the house systems. And another thing that's really nice, and I'd be curious kind of to see how you guys go about this, but these are complex wiring looms, and there's colors of wires that go in different directions, and there's locations of fuses. How do you document the wiring schematic, and what tools do you use for that? So that way, when your team is out in the field, that they can troubleshoot and kind of know where things go. Or do you use like a standardized process?
Honestly, a label maker.
That's a great way to do it.
It's probably one of my number one tools for anybody out there that has a rig. You can use it for everything. If you do not have a label maker, do yourself a favor and go buy a label maker. And just label.
And on both ends of the wire.
Yep. And so what we've been doing when we can is we actually found a clear heat shrink.
Okay.
So we'll put a label like on the terminal or on the connector and then clear heat shrink it. And it helps it stand up a lot longer. I mean, you can kind of wrap the label the other way and make like a little pigtail, and
that's how I normally do it. A little tail on it.
The clear heat shrink that's just that next level of like tidiness and everything. And
then recently you've even upgraded your electrical tape to this like fabric electrical tape. You were pretty proud of that.
That stuff is I'm a believer. That was actually our guy out at Dark Horse that's a wiring guru out there that taught me that one, and I love it because it's just another layer of more of an OEM look than regular electrical tape, and it's great to work with, and it's a bomber product. Yeah,
and when the person that's listening that's thinking about how do they set up their vehicle build, take into consideration all of the things that you might want to put into the vehicle that are an electric draw. That way you can build out the harness just one time. So you've got extra wiring that's maybe going back to your drawer system, and you've got extra wiring that goes up to the hood, especially if you're passing through the firewall. Get that all done on the first shot. That way you're not, like you said, the wire's nest. I mean, I think back on some of my early builds, and they were an absolute, nest of
we've
wiring.
all been there.
So, you have the chance of shorting, you have the chance of vehicle fire. It's very difficult to service it. It can cause other problems in the vehicle, particularly if you start messing with grounds or the original equipment, battery terminals and everything else like that. So it's really important to think about how do I want to expand the electrical system and to build in the wiring at least to support that.
Yeah, I mean, that just comes back to make that plan as best as you can, whatever works for you, sketching it on a napkin, making a Photoshop document. On our last build, I took a kind of a rendering in Photoshop of the truck that I made, and I just started drawing lines of like where the house batteries were going to go, where the start battery was, where I wanted my bus bar under the hood, and just started kind of sketching it out.
Yeah.
And then making a list of what's going to be going to red arc, what needs to go to the start battery bus bar versus the red arc system. And then that way, when I went to actually wire it, I was basically following my own instructions and not trying to remember off the top of my head or figure out, should that go there? Like cool. I already had it all sketched out.
And then you can share that with the team that's in the field. I mean, a lot of times you're with the trucks in the field too, but there are times that the teams are off and running and you're back here in Montana. So, that was just kind of like a fun one to dig into right off the bat.
Yeah.
Where I kind of wanted to take the conversation next is, really around weight. So one of the things that we see frequently in the industry is vehicles that are just really overloaded. Now, your vehicles get heavy because you have lots of people and you have lots of equipment and you have some necessary modifications that you need to provide for vehicle self-recovery, for safe storage and secure storage of equipment. But when it comes to when a vehicle starts to get heavy, let's talk about like the mid-size trucks, for example. So when a mid-size truck starts to get up towards gross vehicle weight, what are some of the things that you guys have found really helps to address it being in that heavier state? Like, what do you do for suspension? What do you do for brakes? How do you handle shocks and jounces, damping of the load, maybe even sway bars? What do you do to help address that?
I mean, all of the above. From our shocks, we'll work with whichever company to make sure they have the proper valving installed in them.
So you like a firmer valving?
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll kind of estimate the weight and then let the company know, hey, this is what it's going to be. And then they can actually go in and change out shims or add shims, however that works. I'm not a shock engineer.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
And so they'll actually increase the valving, or you can order shocks from some companies and just say, it's going to be on a truck that's X amount of pounds over dry weight or factory weight. So they can build that shock to help you better there. Sway bars, we've added sway bars.
What do you feel about those? How are those working for you in the field? I mean, there's some great companies out there like Hellwig and other that make really high quality, larger diameter sway bars. Do you tend to focus on the sway bar in the rear, or do you tend to focus on the sway bar in the front?
Well, with our new builds, we had to only do the rear because our front, on the trail hunters anyways, they have a quick disconnect sway bar.
That's right.
So it's irreplaceable or unreplaceable. So we went with a rear Hellwig, and both our trail hunters that are headed to Europe right now, and it made a big difference. It was noticeable. Both those trucks are pretty heavy. They're pretty built up. For certain reasons, we couldn't do a ton with the suspension, so the sway bar definitely made a difference there.
Yeah, I would think so. And then you get your spring rates right. One of the things that people aren't aware of is when you start to change sway bars, this is what happens to the vehicle dynamics. This is for those that are listening. So if you buy a stock SUV off of the showroom floor, the vehicle is going to be favoring understeer, and that's where the manufacturers believe that the safest way for someone to lose control is to slide into something nose first. And the reason for that is all the crumple zones of the vehicle exist. The airbags are there. It's as safe as possible to actually run into a tree nose first. So manufacturers set up vehicles to understeer. So if someone loses control or jams on the brakes or goes into a corner too hot, they want the vehicle to kind of push through the corner, understeer, and hit whatever it's going to be. And it used to be that vehicles favored oversteer, which is when the rear end starts to come around and everybody gets really active with the steering and screaming and gnashing of teeth and everything else. So it's interesting, when we start to change sway bars, this is what happens. So if we make the front sway bar firmer, you get more understeer. If you make the sway bar looser, smaller diameter, or change some of the physics involved with that, you actually shift it more towards oversteer. So the vehicle will actually turn through the corner more planted. It will have more steering traction, and it'll go through the corner, but it tends to have the likelihood of doing more oversteer. So if one of the things that I like to do is make the vehicle handle a little more neutral than it would from the factory. So what I like to do is kind of like what you guys have done with the new Tacomas, is you keep the front anti-sway bar the same, and then you start to beef up the rear, which starts to then make the vehicle handle more neutral and less likely to oversteer through the corner.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
So I'm sure they handle really great now. And then talk about spring rate. So how do you guys determine spring length for lift and spring rate for load?
Honestly, it was kind of a trial and error on this new setup, because
I can imagine they're brand new trucks.
We're always working with the newer vehicles that a lot of companies don't have a ton of options for, and almost all of our trucks of the newer vehicles are actually using 80 series Land Cruiser rear springs. And
that surprised me when you said that. Like on the Tundra, on the Tundra that you just finished, it's got 80 series like up armored Land Cruiser.
They're 1,300 pound rated, and that's the first time we've gone that high. I mean, usually we go to like the heavies with Old Man Emu, they're 800 pounds. So to go to the 1,300 pounds was a whole new game. But I mean, it's a large truck. It's a big truck. Yeah. So it's funny because all of our builds are big, they're heavy, there's a ton of stuff in them, but we are always actively trying to keep them as simple and as light as possible, which for some may kind of laugh at that, but I mean, we have a job to do.
You make an effort, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we have a job to do. We have a team that needs to work out of them, live out of them. So I mean, everything in them is there to serve at least either one critical purpose, or at least 2 or 3 multiple purposes throughout the expedition.
And not only that, but one of the things that I like about how you guys run your trips is you guys do most of it is camping. So if everybody's camping every night, in order to keep people fresh and rested and well fed and everything else, you're just going to have a lot of gear with you.
Oh, yeah, you can't get around it, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Whereas a lot of times I'll, camp one night and then go stay in an Airbnb or stay in a homestay or a little local pension or accommodation. So I tend to either sleep in the truck or find some local accommodation. But if you're every night, you're trying to do backups and clean cameras and give people some good rest, you end up with a pretty heavy and complex system.
Yeah. I mean, even in transit to and from trips, even before or after we're done shooting, we'll still, pull over on the side of the road, spend the night, get up, make coffee, keep going.
And it saves you guys money. It allows you guys to operate at a fair budget, and it allows you guys to also fully be immersed in the experience. You're outdoors, you're in nature, and then if you're lucky, every week or so you get a shower.
Yeah.
That's funny. The trucks, they also look great. You guys have done a lot of work around your wraps and your graphics packages and all that other stuff. So they really look cool, and they each take on a name. And who names them? That's
Clay.
Clay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Clay names the trucks. Even that's kind of neat because you guys put the name underneath the wrap, so it's like this. It's almost like this relief, like this little bit of a raised nameplate on the side of the trucks that looks really, really cool. All right, so let's dig in. After we've talked a little bit about suspension and how we address weight and everything. So how do you stop the thing? So you got now a heavy vehicle. What are some things that you guys have done to improve braking performance? Obviously the tires are a component of that. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's talk about how you guys improve braking.
Yeah. In the past, we tried swapping out rotors with like drilled and slotted rotors, went to improve brake pads, but
brake pads can help.
It can definitely help. On the newer builds, though, we've gone completely over to the power brake, big brake upgrade kits, and oh my goodness, they're incredible. So it replaces the entire caliper, the pads, the rotor, everything. So basically, even it goes to the braided brake line up into the body. So it's a full brake replacement, and it's already saved Adigan, our orange Tacoma in the Nordic series. Clay and Cyrus, if I remember right, were driving into a city. They're going into a roundabout, and it was pretty heavy traffic. There was it was just chaos in what you'd expect traffic to be. And the auto brake on the truck detected the truck in front of Clay. I think Clay might have been checking his blind spot or something. And the truck directly in front of him slammed on his brakes. So the Tacoma's safety sense detected that and completely locked up the truck and stopped him and prevented him from rear-ending the guy. And Clay was adamant that without those brakes, he would have been going into the back of that truck.
Right.
And even on Orion and our new Tundra that are extremely heavy, they will shut down. It's incredible, the stopping power of those brakes. Yeah.
So you've got the sweep area, you have the diameter of the rotors, which helps with cooling, and of course the overall clamping force. I'm sure that there's a lot of consideration that goes into the pad compounds and everything else. But does it work with all the ABS, all the traction control, all of that stuff works?
Yeah, we've never had a single, even minute problem or hiccup with them. They've just been flawless brakes.
Well, that's really cool to hear. Now, are you able to continue to run a 17-inch wheel, or does it require you to go to a larger diameter wheel?
On the third-gen Tacomas, you can run a 17, but on the third-gen Tundras, Sequoias, you have to go to an 18.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of why the reason you guys have decided to go with a larger diameter tire.
Exactly.
That kind of kicks us into the tire conversation. So one of the things that's interesting is, big tires come at a cost, mostly to fuel economy, oftentimes to stopping distance, which you guys are addressing. They can also affect your gross vehicle weight. Excuse me. So there's lots of things that a large diameter tire are negative around, but once you leave the pavement, a larger diameter tire has so many benefits because You have a much longer contact area, you have much better flotation, you have more ground clearance, you have a larger lever arm to go over ledges and everything else like that. Everything becomes easier for the vehicle in technical terrain. And of course, that goes without saying that they look awesome. I mean, let's all be real. You know, most 99% of people go with 35s because they look sweet, myself included. So I like a larger diameter tire. I tend to like as large a diameter tire as I can fit with only a couple inches of lift, but then I try to keep it at the stock width of the tire, or maybe even a little narrower. And that's because the wheel wells are designed for a certain width of tire. So when the suspension cycles and comes up into the wheel well, you want that tire to fit into that space. So that's when wheel offset and tire width is so critical. So talk me through the reason why you guys decided to go from 33s to 35s, and how has that experience been? Do you think it's overall positive? What are some things that you guys have learned about the shift to the big tires?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a double-bladed sword, but I mean, we went to 35s. Oh gosh, I think it was on the new Tacomas in 21 when we built them for Alaska. And it was mostly because we're going to Alaska. We knew we were going to be in rougher terrain. We wanted something a little bit bigger to help roll over the bumps instead of fall into them. 35s even we've noticed a big help on just corrugated roads. You know, you tend to go over the bumps instead of into the bumps.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we re-geared the Tacomas, you barely notice that you were running a bigger tire. I mean, you could feel it in the steering and everything, but all in all, it was definitely an improvement. And for us, we were going into, okay, if one truck's going to a 35, with all of our vehicles on an expedition, we try to standardize the wheels and tires. So every vehicle's carrying a spare for each other.
Yeah.
So when we have one vehicle with a 33, one with a 35, one with a 17 or 18-inch wheel, I mean, it's an issue for us.
Makes
like
sense.
We try to standardize them. In fact, on this latest expedition, they're all running the exact same wheel, exact same tire. I mean, usually we sometimes switch up wheels from truck to truck, but
just for appearance, yeah.
But yeah, so mostly we wanted to go to 35s on the Tacomas. So we're like, okay, well, we're going to go to 35s on all the trucks. Just makes it easier for working with swapping tires later and, you know, requesting tires. We're not trying to find all these different sizes and which truck does that size go to. So it's kind of part of managing the fleet in a lot of ways, that we just try to standardize whatever we can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then you just decide what is the tread pattern that you want based upon the terrain that you're traveling in. So if you're going to be in more of deserts or more highway driving, then you'll maybe have an all-terrain. And like when does it make that shift to, all right, we're going to put a mud terrain on there?
Well, mud terrains look very cool and aggressive.
They do, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we come back to the looks. It's okay.
It's you know, it's all about the durability and this travel style. If it's going to be highways, deserts, like sand, you were saying, an all-terrain is better than a mud terrain. But there have been times where we had to go into a sandy environment in a mud terrain because that's, you know, is kind of weighing which terrain are you going to be in the most.
Yeah, sure.
We've found that the X3 mud terrains, the general tires are just so tough and strong. So if it's going to be real rocky, sharp, jagged terrain, then mud and then sand, you know, you can't really get one tire to be best of all the worlds. So we just try to get what we'll know will keep us going and be less likely to give us a problem.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, have you guys experienced going from the 33s to the 35s? Have you experienced any axle breakage or any other things that you think are contributed to the 35s, or have they been pretty reliable?
No, just the rubbing.
To the rubbing, yeah, sure. They don't really fit. They kind of fit. They kind of fit. That's your backup alarm.
Yeah. I mean, it's self-clearancing. It'll eventually not rub. So.
That's right, exactly. Or the tire will wear out enough. Yeah, that's true. No,
I mean, honestly, it's other than just the loss in drivetrain power and the need to
and the fuel economy
re-gear and the fuel economy. I mean, no mechanical problems at all.
Yeah, and that tends to be like if you look at American Expedition Vehicles, AEV, and what Dave Harriton does. He recognized a long time ago as an engineer, I mean, a genuine engineer as he is, that, the bigger tire you fit, the better it's going to perform in most conditions. So like AEV finds a way to fit a 37 on a Wrangler, and they find a way to fit a 40-inch tire on a full-size truck because they want to get the tire as big as it can be for flotation and performance and technical terrain. So I do think that we're all, as an industry, we're learning that, okay, maybe a bigger diameter tire is okay as long as we're not going too wide and as long as we're not going so tall that we start to compromise the center of gravity.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and there's and also the OEMs have really helped us. The wheel wells are bigger than they have been, so that you can just fit bigger tires in there. The movement to 9 and 10 speed transmissions have given lower first gears, so you can handle the diameter change oftentimes without even changing the gearing in the axles. The differentials are more robust and they're less likely to fail. They're using better materials in the diffs and the axles. So we're just seeing less and less drivetrain failure from larger tires.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that as with our Tundras, Sequoias, the new Tacomas, they all have 8 to 10 speed transmissions, and they're actually, as far as I can tell, there's no re-gear options yet for those. Unless there's somebody that makes them I don't know about.
They don't necessarily even really need it.
No. I mean, I think there's some masking of the engine working harder because you're lost in miles per gallon with them. But I think re-gearing it would definitely help it get back those miles per gallon, but you're not noticing it having to struggle or work harder or, higher RPMs on the interstate because of all the gears that it has now. Yeah.
So one of your other roles is kind of maintaining the fleet long term. The vehicles come in and out of international expeditions around the world or using them domestically for various adventures. How do you guys handle, what's your weekly inspection look like? Do you have a favorite way to kind of keep these vehicles in service? The reason why I ask is I'm thinking about the person that's listening. They've invested so much time and money in their vehicle. How do you help keep this fleet going where it's always ready to go? What are some of the things that you do to keep these trucks in service?
Yeah, that's great. On an expedition, it's kind of a morning routine to get out a torque wrench, check torque your lug nuts, make sure, get your hands on things. You don't know a bracket or a bolt or a nut's going to be loose if you don't touch it and, poke at it and stuff. So, just, always be looking at your vehicle, always be kind of getting under there, be looking for a problem. Yeah. Hopefully you don't find them, but always have that in your mindset is there is a problem somewhere. I need to find it. Yep. And that'll help you find those issues before it becomes potentially a life-threatening issue.
That's right.
While you're driving or something. When they're here, I would probably say one of the best things we've done is install onboard battery maintainers for the start batteries. I mean, the house batteries have their own systems. You plug into the wall or use solar, but just having some sort of dedicated onboard charger hooked up to your start battery, you can just plug in if you got to store it for a long period of time, because some of these trucks, they'll get stored for a month.
Yeah.
And then chances are we have to jump start it if, something was left on or if it wasn't put away properly, and then that wears down your start battery over time.
Or even ruins them. Sometimes you got to replace them. Batteries are so expensive now. Yeah, the maintainer makes a lot of sense. One of the things that we do during trips, I go back to Expedition 7 or even my trip across Africa recently, is I do have a daily inspection routine, and it's so important to make sure you're trying to go, maybe you're running late or whatever, but take a minute. Look at those tires, inspect the tires. We have to always remember that the most common failure mode of any vehicle is going to be a tire. You're going to get a puncture, you've maybe cut a sidewall, you got a slow leak from a valve core. There's something that's happened with a tire. That's the most common thing to fail in the field. And of course, the most common tire to fail is the one that is the back passenger tire, because it's the furthest from the driver. It's the most likely that the driver has missed something, a rock or whatever, and caused a problem. So look for tire damage. Really, like you said, get your hands on that. Grab the wheel and tire and see if when you shake it, does it feel solid, or are you hearing some clunking and shifting maybe in the bearings or in the suspension components? It's hard to do, but get down on a knee and look underneath that car. like, are there leaks that you weren't expecting? I mean, of course, air conditioned condensation will leak, but if you're smelling gear oil or if you're seeing coolant leaks and those kind of things, look for those things. Look for the shock that's popped out of the bracket, or maybe the nut has backed off and all you see is the stud left, and you've just saved yourself from a huge problem. So yeah, those daily inspections are key. And then I do like to do a deeper dive once a week. So we do weekly inspections. I try to tie that around when I'm staying at an accommodation, like an Airbnb or at a hotel or at a friend's house, because then if the vehicle goes down or you find a real problem, you at least have a place to stay.
Yeah.
So then you can go get parts. You can maybe use an Uber to go find things, and that's when you really want to put the wrenches on there, go through all the systems, pop the hood, check all the fluids. And sometimes with these modern vehicles, you can't even check the oil. You got to do it through the dash or something, but at least make the effort to really go through all those things. So do those daily and weekly check sheets.
Yeah. Yeah, and even another one that we've started doing recently, I need to get better about, is using a paint marker pen and just marking your fasteners, your nuts.
Smart.
So then you can visually see, ooh, those two marks don't line up. There's something going on there because I didn't, mess with it. So obviously something's loosening up. So that's another thing.
That's wise. Yeah, and you see that more and more. Absolutely. Okay, let's shift a little bit towards the house systems and camping. For the kinds of travel that you guys do, if you kind of exclude your DIT vehicle where you're really running a lot of recharging and stuff like that, about how many amp hours do you find you like to have in the house system?
Well, it depends on the role. Our newest build, Dune, wow.
It's okay, we'll edit.
We started calling it Dune. Now oh my gosh. Roman. Jeez. Okay. Yeah, Ryan messed my brain up there because he started calling it Dune before Clay had named it. So, okay.
Dune's a cool name, though.
Yeah. So in our newest Tundra build, Roman, basically we are trying to shift all to electric cooking and production use and running basically a DIT computer for offloading footage. So it had a huge power demand. So we actually went to 3 150 amp hour red arc batteries.
Wow.
So 450 amp hours total.
Wow.
To run induction cooking on the galley side, and then all of our production charging, which, we have a ton of production gear, which most folks are not going to have that level of need for power usage. So the nice thing about that, though, is even with 450 amp hours in there, we were seeing that it was not, it was using it, but it wasn't like, ooh, no, we're at 10%. We got to shut things off or anything. It's that level of overdoing it so much you don't even have to think about it or worry about it, and you can just enjoy camp more.
Yeah.
In our past builds, we've had maybe 1 or 2 100 to 150 amp hour battery or deep cycle batteries, depending on what the usage was. And again, most of the time, we'd be cooking on gas, so then it would just be charging our camera gear and, running maybe a heater at night if it was colder. And again, even with 150 to 200 amp hours, we were not really having any issues with running out at night, because then during the day we're driving, it's charging, and then solar is charging it up. So we always try to go overkill on solar and then overkill as much as we can on batteries and solar, without being ridiculously too much or,
too expensive.
Yeah, too expensive.
Yeah,
so
trying to strike that balance. Yeah, it's funny that you guys started using induction cooking, because I just made the shift myself. Yeah. So in my Scout camper on the Quartermaster, I've got, I probably have about 200 amp hours now. I think maybe a little bit more than that, and a 3,000 watt inverter, and I can boil water, and it's like you're not running out of gas, because you can charge the thing all the time. And then I've got my coffee maker, which is that's actually, I should have made that first, because that's my first priority. I can totally go without food.
Gotta have the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. But I got a little Nespresso machine in there, and that pulls about 1,600 watts. The induction cooktop pulls 1,400 watts. And then I also even went, because I live in the desert Southwest. If I lived in Montana, I would not do this strategy, but I live in the desert Southwest. So I actually have an air conditioner and heater pump, a heat pump. So the AC and the heat are both electric.
Okay.
So you're able to do it off of 200 amps. And it takes a big inverter. Fortunately, once the space gets warmed up, it's not running all the time. So it's just kind of maintaining the temperature in the camper. But yeah, you can run a heater without having any propane, nothing to leak, nothing to blow up.
That's so nice.
Nothing to refill.
Don't have to think about it or worry about it. I mean, that was our big thing is we're going to, in this coming up trip, we're going to be in so many areas. We didn't want to have to worry about adapters for propane tanks, refilling them. Like we brought a few things like a scuttle that would take like the little green 1 pound ones, but we could bring a bunch of those. But we just wanted to try to eliminate and simplify. It's like, okay, we're going to have all this power, and have all the inverter power in the world, and so let's make use of it and eliminate a gas source.
Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be more of a personal question.
Yeah.
So you've built a lot of trucks. Excluding your own personal vehicles, which one is your favorite? Which one's your favorite one that you have built? If you had to pick your favorite, they're not listening. They don't know. They're not gonna break down on you.
I think the newest Tundra Roman that we built is up there. That's the first one that came to mind. I mean, they all have kind of a certain soft spot in my heart, but I love the dedicated systems in it. I love how much of a ground up build it is.
That Bowen custom,
the Bowen's bed on it, what they did there.
That thing's rad.
With
that
the fridge.
Slides out. The National Luna slides out of the side. And it has an alu cab on the top.
Yeah,
right?
So we worked straight with them and alu cab to get all the dimensions. So then they built that system to drop the alu cab onto it. And so it's two systems that were never, they never knew each other. They were never, we basically made them work, but it's amazing how functional it is.
Yeah, it's got a nice little table in there, and they can sleep 2 or 3, 4 maybe even.
Yeah, with the Alicab family camper on there, I mean, you could fit 4 up there. I mean, it'd be pretty snug, but for a family, that's not an issue at all. So it's a 4-seater pickup, long bed, hybrid, Tundra. And so it's got all the check marks of a long, global expedition vehicle. And
you guys, because you're taking the vehicle, this is an important classification here. You guys are sending these vehicles internationally, so they do have larger fuel tanks on them. Not everybody can do that. There are EPA requirements and stuff around that, but you guys are shipping them overseas. So you guys have some custom fuel tanks that get your fuel capacity up to 30 gallons or so.
Yeah, so each one we have a 25-ish gallon auxiliary fuel tank.
Awesome.
That'll just pump right into the main tank.
And you guys are going to need that for future destinations, which is pretty exciting. So if you were, let's talk a little bit about your own personal builds. Like maybe you can tell us like how you prep your own personal vehicle, and if you could pick any vehicle in the world, like how would you, like what would be your checklist of like how would Tanner, like what would be the Tanner build, the Tanner program? What would you pick?
Those Quartermasters have definitely caught my eye.
They're cool.
I've been wanting. I have a 2014 4Runner right now, so it's an SUV.
Nice truck.
Yeah, I love it. I've had it since 2017. Put 100,000 miles on it. All I've done is just change the oil.
Yeah.
So extremely reliable. I liked that it had larger rear seats for a smaller SUV for now that I got 2 boys. But lately, with what I like to do in the summertime with kayak fishing, having a truck bed function would be really nice because I've been loading and unloading my kayak on the roof of my 4Runner. So I've been looking at Tundras, I am definitely a sucker for the Quartermaster, Ineos Quartermasters though. Just, I love the styling and just
so different,
the funk that they have of like, ooh, that's cool. Like I wish other companies would do that, but they have a cool factor about it.
Yeah, they do. So it's hard to find a heavy duty midsize with solid axles and factory auxiliary battery system and factory winches and factory snorkels and all the things, right?
All the factory things. Yeah. It's like usually we're the ones having to figure out how to put these on our rig.
That makes sense, though. I mean, it totally makes sense because you spend all day working on trucks. You probably don't want to work on your own truck that much. Yeah.
I know. I'm very thankful and grateful where I'm at with my 4Runner because I'm to the point where I'm like, I don't really know what else I'd want to do to this.
It works.
I've got, there's always that one big thing I'm dreaming. Oh, I can't wait till I can save up to get this or that. And it's like I'm to a point where I haven't really done anything to it in a long time, just because it's
you just get to drive it.
Yeah, it's honestly the daily driver. To and from work, I don't get out a whole lot into the mountains as I used to. And I need to be better about that. But yeah, it does exactly what I need it to do.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about the good, but it's on the Overland Journal podcast. We also talk about the bad. So let's pick maybe 1, 2, or 3 things that you guys tried that just didn't work. Things that and we're not trying to disparage anybody's company. It's just sometimes things just don't work for your needs. So what are some things you felt, fell short or didn't really work that well or you wouldn't do again?
Probably, one thing that comes to mind is spend good money on the electronics. Yeah. Do not try to get like cheap Chinese. I understand that there's a certain budget everybody has, but man, 9 out of 10 times, if you cheap out on electronics, especially like even electrical fittings or wiring, connectors, stuff like that you're like, oh, I'll just spend a little bit less and get this versus the good version or something. It's like, last thing you want is to be out in the middle of nowhere and get left stranded because that part failed. Yeah. So,
no, that's a really great example, and I think if people keep it in mind, if you're having to go with the lowest possible budget solution, you're probably better off not doing it at all. So like, don't do the $399 winch because when you really need it, because it's a safety it's a safety device.
Totally.
You're better off not having it at all because then you would be less likely to take as many risks and maybe you have some max tracks with you or whatever. For me, like some examples that come to mind are like the portable power systems. There's definitely multiple classes of quality in those things. So, and you're really putting all your eggs in one basket. So it's got your solar charge controller, it's got your inverter, it's got your battery in there, and it's surprising. Like some of them, they'll swell up. We had one that like the whole case exploded.
Oh, wow.
And so I think a lot of that's gotten better, but those are some examples of things where, using the appropriate tool for the job is you're always better off doing that. So those are some things that come to mind for me that I've had fail through the years.
Yeah, especially those portable power banks. You go to Amazon and Google it or Amazon it, and there's every random company you've never heard of under the sun that make their own version. And it's like the pricing is very, tempting, but man, it's like that's sketchy to think about how many options are out there that you don't have any idea who makes them or what is in it.
That's right. Like another one that comes to mind is, we've only had one fail, but like, for example, we used a Lifesaver jerry can and it split at the seam. And if you've got all your eggs in one basket. So I like to have water in multiple containers. I don't like to just have one water container because if the water becomes compromised and it's no longer potable, or if it ends up with a leak or a crack and you lose all 20 gallons, then you're really without water. So, I learned after that is like, hey, I want to have some of those MSR dromedary bags in the footwell, and maybe I've got an extra Lifesaver jerry can, or I use another type of jerry can. The nice thing about the Lifesavers is they have the built-in filter and they can build in some pressure. But, it's interesting, because we're always testing new stuff like that, especially at Overland Journal. We're constantly checking out new things, and it's surprising when you really start to beat on them like, oh, wait, that didn't actually hold up. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's good feedback. I really appreciate your thoughts around that. Yeah, that's a good point on all the electrical stuff.
Yeah, honestly, we are, as me working with X Overland, we're very thankful to be working with the best of the best
high
with
quality
all of
brands,
our companies.
Yeah.
So I unfortunately don't really have a lot of experience with the cheaper stuff because we work with Red Arc for our house battery management systems, and we work with pretty much the best that we see fit for our use in all of them. And so in my personal area of expertise, I've definitely gone through my process of cheap light bars over the years in my rig, and I finally was like, okay, I just need to spend the money and get a good quality light bar. And that is another area where it's like, again, now they're all, they all look good, they all function for a cheaper price, but if you're looking at getting good lights on your vehicle that you're going to rely on and need to use for years, get into the good companies. Don't go on the Amazon bandwagon on those light bars.
Yeah, or just don't run it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
You're better off just not even putting it on the vehicle if it's going to end up failing you in the field and be a source of frustration. Well, Tanner, tell me one of your favorite stories of you've done some cool adventures with X Overland and yourself personally. What's your favorite adventure story of your own experience that you'd like to share with the audience? Your own little moment on an X Overland trip that you'd like, a story you'd like to tell.
Ooh, boy. Ooh, putting me on the spot there. My last expedition I was on was Iceland.
Which is incredible.
Oh, gosh, that place is incredible. Honestly, favorite story probably would be the F-Road in Iceland that we took. I think it was the F-206 that we took when Torfi was there. It was towards our beginning part of working our way up through the middle of Iceland. Yeah. Just that whole road was probably the most spectacular landscapes I had ever seen in my life. Yeah. And just the whole trip in general was definitely a highlight for me, just learning about their culture and how much they respect the land there. Yeah. The tread lightly movement.
You look like you're Icelandic, like you just came out of the pub and jumped in the truck.
Oh man. But yeah, that whole, I would say, man, if you can go to Iceland, rent an off-road vehicle, rent a vehicle, travel around, learn the culture, learn how much they respect the land there, and
it's amazing.
No off-road is literally no off the road. Yeah. And it really opened my eyes to how remote and isolated you can still go explore there, even though it sounds like on paper you'd be very limited on where you can go. And it's amazing how isolated you can still get there, even on a little island.
Yeah, and you still haven't even crossed the glaciers yet.
Yeah, that's
which amazing. Is just awesome. Well, Tanner, it's been such a joy to have you on the podcast. I have such admiration for the work that you do. I think I've watched the level of the quality of your work and your thoughtfulness around the builds continue to evolve. I've heard Clay sing your praises about the quality of work that you do on the vehicles, and a vehicle dependent expedition team. They really start off with the quality and the attention to detail of the person who built the trucks. And so you're really the foundation of a great expedition. And for those that are listening, and myself as a reminder, is like, we need to be in that same mindset. We need to take the time to build the vehicle properly, make sure we're using quality components, that we're paying attention to the details, that we're inspecting the vehicle before we go. That way we can get back and have a great adventure.
For sure.
Well, Tanner, thank you so much, and I look forward to the next time we get to have you on the podcast.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and we thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.